Bits and Bricks.
Welcome to Bits and Bricks, a podcast about all things Lego games. I'm Ethan Vincent.
And I'm Brian Crecente. Together, we look back at the rich 25-year history of Lego games, chat with early developers and seasoned studios who have all tackled the creation of video games for one of the most popular and respected toy companies in the world, the Lego Group.
That was the track Avant Garden's launch from the newly remastered Lego Universe original game soundtrack. And for any die-hard fans of the game out there, you may have not heard that particular variation before. But Brian, there's so much to talk about when it comes to Lego Universe, from how it was developed to what it achieved to the fan community it has generated. But I think sometimes people forget just how amazing this game soundtrack and score is, the actual music that accompanied the game.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. It's amazing because I think in general, people sometimes will forget about the sort of soundscape of a video game, and that's unfortunate.
Yeah.
In this case, the soundtrack of Lego Universe mainly features orchestra arrangements that were composed by Brian Tyler. But the thing is that the soundtrack sort of died alongside the game when the plug was pulled on the massively multiplayer online game way back in 2012 because, it was an online-only game, which means you can't just load it up and play it when you want to. Yeah. And because of that, you couldn't really listen to any sort of official copy of that wonderful music outside of the game or past the year 2012.
That's right. Until now.
Yes.
Right? To celebrate the 10-year anniversary of the game's original release, the Lego Group teamed up with Brian Tyler and Richard Dekkard again, to remaster all of the amazing music and release it in a number of forms. You can purchase it as a digital copy of the album in pretty much any online music store. Listen to the entire thing if you want to as a single album on streaming services and YouTube. And there's even plans for a limited run physical release of the soundtrack, which I think is pretty cool.
Yeah. Totally.
Now, one of the things I'm super excited about is this YouTube version, which is this continual playing of the album with some pretty nice visual gems coming from the time of Lego Universe and its creation, showing some concept art, mock-up gameplay things, a lot of fan things that are in there, and a lot of footage from the behind the scenes back in the days. So that's really exciting. But what's also cool is this conversational podcast today. We had an opportunity to chat with both Richard Dekkard and Brian Tyler about those early years of creating the soundtrack back in 2010 and the process of recreating it for this new standalone release that you will be enjoying. So, yeah, that's pretty exciting, Brian.
It is. So Richard Dekkard, for those of you who don't know, is a multi-platinum selling composer, producer, and sound artist who has worked on everything from movies and music to trailers and recording projects. He also, of course, worked on video games, including the massive hit League of Legends by Riot Games and, of course, Lego Universe. He actually started working with developer NetDevil back when they were creating their car combat massively multiplayer online game Auto Assault. He then went on to work on League of Legends before coming back to NetDevil as the audio director for Lego Universe, where he oversaw the creation of the soundtrack, the effects, and the soundscape for the game.
Yeah, I love a lot of the stuff that Richard Dekkard did for the game. There's just so many great sounds and great music, including this amazing Lego Universe opening cinematic. Let's take a listen.
Traversing the reaches of space and time, 4 explorers brought together in their search for a unique and precious element.
Patrick Stewart. You get Patrick Stewart to do the narration on this. How did you guys make that decision? And again, was that something that he immediately was up for?
One of the problems with talking about things that were 10 years ago is that when we were in the middle of doing this stuff is we didn't get much sleep. So the memories may be a bit foggy, but I remember this came up kind of out of the blue, meaning I'm sure there are other people who are planning this for a long time, but it only came on my radar sort of out of the blue that, oh, this trailer's being produced. We're going to need voiceover for it. Who are we going to get? And one of the things I learned at EA is to don't be afraid to think big. Because when you work with small studios and boutique developers, you kind of take on this mindset of constantly trying to, oh, we got to save money. Oh, we won't have the budget for that. It won't work. EA removed all of that from me and embedded in me that go big or go home. And it's a good philosophy, and I do stand by it today. And so that meant, okay, A-list actors. Who are we going to get to be the iconic voice for this trailer? And we came up with, the main principals of the studio had their own inputs. And I don't honestly remember all who was on the list. I do remember Morgan Freeman was one of them.
Of course.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, the voice of God.
And I do also have this sense that I had assumed Patrick Stewart would do it because the particular trailer in question is based on a spaceship and in space, and it just seemed like the likely choice to me. And I'm not afraid to push things very subtly in the direction I want them to go in. So I have no doubt that I lobbied hard and made the case very quickly that he's the guy and that's who we should choose.
And Brian, I can attest to the fact that Richard was very tired and very beat down because we were in England at Air Studios and we were recording Patrick Stewart. I was at least just doing the behind the scenes, and he was focused on this immense script. I mean, it was this crazy long script, Richard, where I remember where you're having him say things like, press the left button.
Oh my God.
And I know half of that stuff probably never made it in, but I just remember you being super sick that day. And you were trying to keep it together. And when I say sick, I think you were at the beginning of catching something. So it wasn't like you were, half dead, but it was a hard day. I remember, jet lag and all.
Well, yes, I would just interject that, no, I was very sick already because I had to fly. Well, we should explain. So Patrick Stewart, once he was chosen to be the guy, we negotiated a financial arrangement with his management in Los Angeles, and that was a done deal. But then there was the harder part of the issue is the time. When are you going to do this? When are you going to meet up? And he trots all around the world doing a million things every day. 1 minute he's in New York, next LA, so we were kind of having a lot of difficulty finding when and where we were going to record him. And I remember I got 2 days notice that he'll be in London. This is your only chance because he's going to China. And so, Ethan and I where were you flying from, Ethan? Were you in Europe?
No, I was flying from Salt Lake, I remember.
So Ethan jumped on a plane from Salt Lake. I jumped on a plane from Denver.
Yep.
We flew to London. I was sick the whole flight over. And so those pressurization changes in the cabin were just like an ice pick into my brain. And I don't remember if we recorded the same day we landed, but it would feel like we did, but maybe we didn't. I don't know. But I had to hide that I was sick and I was like just dying inside and drugged up on NyQuil. And then I felt bad because he was going to China to do some kind of like 3-month-long theater performance of some play. And I was so afraid that I was going to get him sick on his flight to China and then ruin some big theater production he was involved in.
Yeah. I remember you stayed away from the main interview, and I thought that was wise. Yeah. Yes, that was good.
What was it like working with him? He, as you said, he does a lot of work, and it's all over the place. Was he pretty easy to work with?
Yeah. Whatever impressions you have of Patrick Stewart as a human being based on his public exposure, that's what he is and better. He's funny and friendly and sweet and nice and cordial and just as good as you could imagine it would be. Okay, Patrick, if you want to just give a rough read, we'll get level set.
Do you want to cue me or give an ident for each one, or how shall we?
We're just going to wild roll and record everything,
fine.
and we'll edit it later.
Very well. they quickly descended upon an ancient temple, a relic of the mythical first builders.
Thank you very much, Patrick. So we noticed the difference when you moved from one page to the next based on your head position.
Aha!
So I think what we might do is do just a page at a time that way.
Yep, and I'll just have to pause while I turn the page.
Yep, that'll be perfect.
Yeah, I remember being a little nervous setting up the behind-the-scenes camera in the recording booth, but very quickly, he was just so friendly and nice, putting everyone at ease. And at the end, I'm sure you remember this, Richard, but Patrick shared his thoughts on the Lego brand.
I think, because I'm so old, that Lego wasn't around when I was a child. But I made up for it because I have 2 children. My son is the eldest, and as soon as he could handle anything, I bought him toys, and Lego was one of the very first. He was a little too young at first to know exactly what to do with it. So when he had gone to bed, I played with it. And then he would have things that he could play with when he got up in the morning. So there was a period when I think I was taxing my imagination by having to make something different every night because he wanted to see something new every morning. But we still have them. My children never threw away any of their toys, and so the Lego collection still exists. It's probably worth something, isn't it, now?
Yeah. Thank you very much, Patrick.
You're welcome.
I know that you at some point decided to get Brian Tyler, or the decision was made to get Brian Tyler involved in the soundtrack. How did that come about, and what was that process like?
Well, I think that ties in exactly to why NetDevil and the Lego Group were reaching out to me, is because the music is just crucial to creating the experience and the emotion of a brand, of a product, of a gameplay experience. I knew that this was going to be bigger than me. And so I needed to find somebody who could, in my opinion, deliver the goods. And there are a million composers you can hire, and there's sort of a sense that if you listen to music, you're an expert in music, and so you know good music because you've listened to music and it made a feeling in you. But there are many other layers to music other than that, in the sense of trying to produce a product. And I knew from listening to Brian's catalog of works that he was going to specifically be able to produce the type of music and themes that would be memorable for generations and iconic, the same way movie themes for certain movies are iconic, like Indiana Jones or Space 2001. That's what it's called, isn't it? Space
2001, A Space Odyssey, right?
But you see what I'm saying, and that you have to have very careful skill set to craft thematic content in music to leave these memory impressions. And it's a skill in itself versus just producing background music.
So let's talk a little bit about the remaster.
Sure.
How did that get started, and what is your involvement on remastering the soundtrack?
I made a promise to Brian a long time ago that we would release this soundtrack album. And because of the way Lego universe died, I guess is the appropriate metaphor, there were a lot of political implications that prevented that from happening. And over the past 10 years, a lot of things have changed. A lot of people have changed. And this has created the opportunity for, I think, for new life to be blown into the asset of the music. And Ronnie was just wonderful. He was always such an advocate for the direction that the music was going in. And he really valued it and helped me navigate the political aspects of getting it produced. And I think he's been really valuable and smart and being able to revive this on an appropriate anniversary date and gain the political will internally and navigate all the different aspects of it to, give something back to the fans who remember it vividly.
Yeah, it's interesting. We talked about this a little at the beginning, but I think there are people out there who maybe don't realize or haven't sat back and thought about the fact that, a movie is an hour and a half or a TV show is 30 minutes to an hour, whereas some video games can be literally hundreds of hours, or in a game like League of Legends, people will play those games every single day for months or years. And so I'm assuming when you're designing the soundscape for those things, it's got to be a very different thought process and like how you can create something that can be listened to that often.
It's also mind-boggling when one of the games that you've done ends up being an esport candidate or participant and gets broadcast in a stadium full of 100,000 people and broadcast on TV all through Korea. Like it does get insane. But the point you're making is correct that, you do hear little mistakes. You do often wish you could have fixed something. And it does force you to be very careful about, leaving stuff in that could be better and makes you more disciplined because and it's not just video games. I mean, quite often you can write a piece of music and you can think it's going to be a huge success and really be enjoyed, and it turns out to be a miserable flop and failure. And then something that you did in 30 minutes that is kind of a throwaway thing ends up being immensely successful. So it's difficult.
When you laid in that final master soundtrack, and I remember seeing those files, and you put those into the game, and the first animators and developers and executives, saw it with that music. How did that work? And what was the reaction?
There was a great sense of satisfaction in knowing that the music was so good. It made my job easier in the sense that I knew I could depend on it and that it worked well and it sent the message it needed to. And, to the great credit of the Lego executives and NetDevil, founders, I never once received any interference or pushback on what I was doing. And I don't just mean in a negative way, but it's quite often in music that people can get excited and want to get their fingers in the mix just out of excitement and wanting to be involved. But they were really great in that they never tried to get inside what Brian and I were doing and mess with it. And then we're very happy and grateful with the final experience. And that's what I take away is the lack of interference. It was really the accolade that they approved and were happy with it. But it might be somewhat unique in the sense that we produced something as, I don't know the right word, not impressive, but let's say grandiose, because the score really is grand for a video game in terms of its production, its use of orchestras. It's not so uncommon nowadays, but 10 years ago it was less common. And for a kid's game or an MMO, it was even less common. So I think that it helped raise the impression of what was possible in video games. And I think that because the landscape was devoid of maybe this level of production and orchestration and music quality, to some degree that journalists noticed it or reviewers noticed it. It stood out a little because of that, probably.
Well, that was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I always enjoy talking to Richard. He's such a great guy and, has so many cool stories, and how he brought this soundtrack together is really, really cool.
Yeah.
Next up is our conversation with composer Brian Tyler.
Yeah, and again, it's so great that they took the time to do this. Tyler has a very busy schedule, and was able to sort of sit down and do this lovely chat with us. For those of you who don't know who Brian Tyler is, I'm sure you've heard his music, whether you realize it or not. Basically, if you've gone to a movie ever,
Yeah, exactly.
basically,
Yeah.
you've heard his stuff. Over his career, he scored some of the most iconic film music of the modern age. And, that includes things like He's worked on tons of the Marvel Cinematic Universe films, the Expendables trilogy, Crazy Rich Asians, most of the Fast and Furious franchises, and obviously he's also, outside of movies, done a lot of television work. More importantly for us, though, he's also done video game work. So obviously Lego Universe, but he worked on a bunch of other games, including one of my personal favorites, Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3, Far Cry 3. So yeah, he's done a lot of work. So Brian, I read somewhere that you play more than 30 musical instruments and that you're self-taught.
Yeah.
That's amazing. What got you into music? Like what was it that sort of made you realize that music was something that you were, passionate about?
I was lucky. I had the music bug inside, but my parents happened to have musical instruments around. Funny enough, neither of them play music, but there was a piano, and my parents got a drum kit from my older sister who didn't take to it at all, so it was just sitting there, and they brought back a guitar from a trip, and the acoustic guitar was sitting there, and there was the different instruments just were around, and then my grandmother did play piano. It was quite amazing at it, so that was definitely an influence. But it was, I just love listening to music. My dad was a big music aficionado, same with my mom, and they were always listening to everything from, rock to jazz to film scores, classical music from the different eras of classical music, and I just was fascinated by all of it, from kind of, Pink Floyd to Chopin and everything in between. And as a kid, kind of hip-hop revolution, I got very interested in that, and drum programming as well, along with drumming and electronic music, and was always fascinated by, John Williams and film composers. And so the entire time I was constantly just consuming music, and as I developed my composing style, it stood on the shoulders of giants, no question. It was something that I looked up to so many artists, and the kind of influence they had became part of whom I became, and all the way till here we are today.
So you have gone on to compose and conduct music for more than 70 films, including obviously a lot of huge hits, like some of the best Marvel Cinematic Universe films, and have done tons of work in television. What made you decide way back in 2010 that you wanted to work on Lego Universe in a video game?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, up till then, it was pretty much, I would say 85% film, 15% television, and it's just video games were something that I loved, and Lego, and I grew up with Lego, and it was playing and creating. It was the kind of my father's influence. He's an architect, so building this was a big deal growing up. Kind of, I think I could see that I was a music guy, but at the same time I really loved building, and that kind of thing. And as well as growing up, doing video games. And so when I saw this project coming along, it seemed like this merging of these two things that I just happened to love. And it kind of got to that inner little boy, which occasionally happens. That even happens with the Marvel universe, that I was a comic book collector, and when I scored Star Trek or any of these things, I was lucky to work on things that I loved growing up, and Lego was no different. It's just the only difference was that, oh wow, this is cool. This is going to be a complete immersive universe inside something so specifically that I knew as building blocks. So it was a joy to even think about, but then when I got the opportunity to do it, I jumped on it. This being your first game, and the fact that this is a massively multiplayer online game, were you sort of surprised to find how much sound and music had to be created to sort of fill up the game? Yeah. Well, it's interesting when you're gaming, you don't necessarily, it kind of washes over you. You don't necessarily,
Right.
I think even as someone that's a composer, I tend to get lost in what I'm doing, and the music affects me in the way it's supposed to, kind of, in a way that guides you emotionally and all those things. So I never really calculated just how much music there would need to be or how it needed to work. And that was something with this score, was that with Lego Universe, it changes every time depending on who's playing. And in that way, that's who's dictating how my music is going to be played and in what order and how one transitions to the next and all these things. So to kind of create everything that was modular, where you could go to one world and then to another and back and forth, and how that music kind of changes key and goes from one piece to another and backwards and forwards and all these things, was something that you have to think about. And it's also very interesting because in a way it's like listening to the music, how it play with all these different players. It's kind of, they're all hearing it in a different order and in a different way. And that's really cool. But also it makes it more kind of complicated to just technically do, but definitely worth the challenge. It was a blast. And then later with games, it became, I kind of knew this when I did Call of Duty and Far Cry and those things. I knew what I was in for, in a sense, and this kind of this really primed me for that.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like, just kind of looking at your history, it looks like you went almost 10 years before you did another MMO. Was that sort of because you were bruised from the experience?
No. It's just, it's funny. It's more of like a schedule thing. I am so tied into movies that often, when something comes along, I won't be able to fit it in. But with this, it was, I love the experience so much. I mean, I really love the game too, and... Yeah. And so many people, it was so special, and people still feel that way. And so this one, it always had a special place in my heart. But it was fun going back and getting into it once again about a decade later.
Brian, how did you find that leitmotif, the main motive, the dun, dun, da, 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 da? I mean, that is so undeniably Lego Universe. I don't think that can ever be unheard once you hear it. It is Lego Universe. How did you come up with that? And was that something that kind of came natural, or did you really have to kind of dig deep?
No, what's so funny? That was the very first thing that occurred to me of anything in the entire. That motif was before any of the Nimbus Plaza or anything. It was like I heard, and it was just like that. It's one of those things that you never know where or when it's going to happen. Kind of like, I don't know how composing works. I have no idea how my brain kind of comes up with. So it's funny because I talk to students and people, and how does it happen? And it's like, I have no idea. The terrifying thing is that I'm just going to wake up one day and it's like blank.
Nah, I don't think so.
Like, it's just like, wait, I don't have a process of like sitting down and kind of, some people are kind of improvisational. They'll sit down, they'll kind of tinker around on the piano until they find something. For me, it's always, I'm sitting there and all of a sudden it appears in my head, and I have to go write it down or pick it out kind of, from my head. So when I sat down, I remember so distinctly. It was like brass, and that kind of that last part, it becomes almost, the first part's very like, adventure, and then even within that main melody, it goes into this kind of legato, emotional part of it right away. And that was unusual, that it didn't kind of just continue in this one tone all the way through it. The actual theme is a multi-part kind of multi-tonal adventure. And in a way, I think that makes a lot of sense if you think about it. I wasn't thinking about it when I wrote it, just happened, but because of the different worlds and the different tones and the different places you can go. It's like a journey of many different kinds. And so that, to me, I was really happy with the theme and glad that I thought of it.
Man, I'm glad too.
Yeah.
And the thing when Sir Patrick Stewart's voice comes in on that on the cinematic trailer, it's like
Oh
the
my
four
God, yeah.
explorers were jubilant, and then you hear dun dun dun. Like it couldn't
So
have been a
good.
better marriage. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so funny. It's crazy. I didn't meet him until about 2 years ago when I did Charlie's
Nice.
Angels. I was just at Elizabeth Banks' house. It was some shindig. I don't remember what it was, but anyway, he walks in, and it's like, dang, there's Patrick Stewart. And so I was like, do I talk to him? And I'm a huge Patrick Stewart fan even from I, Claudius days, but huge Trekker and all that. And so I just walk up to him like, hey man, I wrote your theme, whatever, for Charlie's Angels, and because he's Bosley, and but I was like, but it's crazy that we worked together before on Lego Universe, and it was like such a proud moment for me to have that. I mean, that voice that could read a phone book and make it interesting over my music,
gosh.
just making it sound so good. It just nails every word, and yeah, that was fun. I often kind of almost hear his voice still when I hear the theme, just kind of in my head,
Okay, let's take a little journey back in time to end of May 2010 and listen to some of the excerpts from a video I did back then on the creation of the music for Lego Universe.
We're recording with this fantastic orchestra in Bratislava, and we're here in Los Angeles monitoring it. Actually, we can see them and we can hear them and experience it as it goes, but for us, it starts at midnight and it goes all through the night till the morning. And for them, it's the daytime, and it's this kind of weird thing, no matter what, when you're doing sessions and you want to record the music for something, you want it to be the best it possibly can, but you kind of get flipped around, you're a little bit upside down in terms of time. So we're in a darkened studio anyway, we don't really know what time it is.
Talk to me a little bit about that time zone switch. This is 2010, so obviously getting really stable internet connections to work. Alan Wilson and the Slovak orchestras is performing. How did that work? And was that a good experience? Was it a little frustrating? Were there ups and downs? How did that work for you, being in LA and trying to get that all to come together?
Yeah, it was really cool actually. I think because everyone involved was great. It could have been highly stressful because, you're hanging on a thread. You're recording this orchestra all the way across the world, and it's in the middle of the night in LA, and it's in Bratislava. So, here we are recording and just praying that, the internet doesn't go down, and all of a sudden you're just, there's nothing you can do, and so I just talked to them ahead of time and talked to Alan, and I'd worked with Alan before, the conductor, who was great, and he flew in from London into Bratislava to conduct it, and it was like, okay, if everything goes sideways and all of a sudden we lose contact, here's what I'd love for you to do, and you kind of give your best foot forward. Fortunately, it didn't happen. We had some glitches here and there, but really it was so smooth that by, a couple hours in, I felt like I was just in the booth in Bratislava talking to them, talking to the orchestra. And, it sounded, you had this amazing Pro Tools rig recording it in the room out there. The hall is beautiful. It sounded amazing. And so for me, it was just, and it was a great experience. It was fun hanging out with everybody in LA, and I love recording sessions. It just took a minute to kind of get in the groove with knowing that there is this time difference, and it's like there's a little bit of a delay when you're talking to them, but it was awesome, especially 2010. That's incredible.
And what Brian has done with this music, it's absolutely terrific.
This is conductor Alan Wilson speaking.
He's written everything that is needed for the orchestra to interpret the piece, and the orchestrators are first class. There's nothing we need to add, or there's very little I need to say. It's all written in the music so that the final take is exactly what Brian imagined in his mind in the first place. Believe me, it's fantastic.
So now we're here 10 years later, and probably, obviously, maybe a year ago, you at some point hear that they're talking about remastering the game soundtrack. What's the first thought that goes through your head when you hear about this?
Yeah, excited, because I was wanting the music to be available to fans and also just music fans as well. But certainly people that may hear the music now and go, what is this? And but really, if you've lived a game, if you really love it and you've been in that world, it's real to you. It's like if you hear music, it is one of those memories. It's like a smell. It just takes you back to the time, like beyond anything. It reminds you of the summer of whatever year, when you were in 7th grade or whatever it might be. And to me, all these people that love the game, they were there, and this music means something to them, and it kind of is almost like a beyond nostalgia. It's a place that they spent time. And so it's an emotional connection to it. So I was so happy that could be now provided for those people, as well as, a greater audience. But certainly the people that love the game, that's special to me, that the music is special to them. So I was so excited that, that is happening.
Do you, when you're the one doing the remastering, I assume, right? Or you're working directly on this? In doing that, are you just going in and trying to sort of improve the sound with the latest technology, or are you trying to sort of tweak things? Like, are you going in and doing a little editing if it were words?
So no, I think what I want to do is go back and it's really preserve how it originally was musically. So when people hear it, they are immediately transported back in time to, all the time when they were playing it and being in that world. But the thing about it is that I want it to be as clear and perfect sounding in terms of music and how it would translate onto speakers or headphones or whatever it might be in today's world. And so it's kind of that remixing, remastering, making sure it's just really, really perfect sounding, where it's like the best possible sounding music that you can have. And so it's just like a careful process of making sure you preserve what it was, musically and emotionally, but sonically it's in the best possible position.
Have you found any particular challenges in doing that? Any issues you've run into?
Well, the thing that I hadn't done before is kind of balance it for a single listen, where you put it on, you kind of start on track 1, you go all the way through, and you have this musical journey. And it has to be an album as well, So it was really that was the thing, kind of making sure that everything flowed together really naturally from a perspective of sound and music. So it feels like, you're almost going to a concert and you're listening through how one goes from one to the next. So ordering it was important, and also just making sure that the levels and the kind of the tone of the mixing and the EQ and all those things really flowed together. So it was really one tapestry, one piece. And I'm really happy with it.
Now, I know you talked a little bit about this a little earlier, but you have gone on to score some of the biggest Hollywood hits out there, and you obviously have a full plate. Why did you decide to come back and do this work on a video game that you were involved in 10 years ago? I'm sure you have other things you could be doing with your time.
No, sure. Well, it is one of those things that was probably, in terms of like a soundtrack, it was the one that got away. I was so proud of it, and still am, of this score. Like, I love it, and
Nice.
I get asked about it all the time. Is that going to be available? Is that going to be available? I mean, it's 10 years of me fielding questions saying, I don't know. I hope it is, and it's like, anytime I go to Comic-Con and I'd be signing stuff and is that going to be available? It's like, and it's, so partly that, but, partly whenever I'd answer, I'd say, I was earnestly feeling like, dang, yeah, I hope it is, I really want that for, the fans and also for new people. I'm really proud of the music, and I'm proud of the game. So yeah, I was not going to miss a beat in terms of wanting to help out and get this out there to the world.
Man, that was, I know we said this already about talking to Richard, but Brian, it was such a great interview. And again, a reminder of the importance of music, that music plays, not just in our lives, but also in video games. Maybe I said that backwards, but you know what I mean. It's important, and I think it has a lasting impact. And that's obvious here because we're now returning to this music from 10 years ago.
Yeah, and I think the way that Brian Tyler composed the music for LEGO Universe is pretty amazing because, as he said, he wasn't composing for a set film that had these locked scenes that, were already conveying everything they needed to convey, and then he adds music and, elevates it. But he's working in these kind of like little worlds and these little silos where the gameplay kind of defines, the mood and the feeling and, of course, the art. And it was just fascinating to hear how he went about doing that. And I like to think back of that night that we were kind of pulling that all-nighter and recording. And here he is conducting, rocking out to the music, having a great time while it's being recorded in Bratislava. And I have really fond memories of that night and just seeing that magic come together and those little fun interplays between the composer, the conductor, and Richard Dekkard in really crafting the music for this amazing game. Man, is music ever important? And did we learn a lot from I think this soundtrack and just taking it as serious as they did and making great music?
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, one thing that this episode really made me want to do is go listen to that music. So I'm really excited for it coming out so I can sort of just chill to the soundscape of LEGO Universe. So while we focused exclusively on the soundtrack for LEGO Universe in this particular episode, we did also speak with Brian and Richard about the life and death of the game in our two-part examination of LEGO Universe. They sort of sandwiched this episode, so you can go and listen to those two episodes together to hear about the making of the game. Make sure you check it out if you want to hear more about how that game, LEGO Universe, came to life, its convoluted development, and unfortunately its ultimate and some say untimely death.
Bits and Bricks is made possible by LEGO Games. Our producer is Ronnie Scher. Your hosts are Brian Crecente and Ethan Vincent. Episode producing and editing by Ethan Vincent. Writing by Brian Crecente. Mixing and sound design by Dan Carlisle. Original music by Brian Tyler from the remastered LEGO Universe original game soundtrack. Additional music by Peter Premer. We'd like to thank our participants, Richard Dekkard and Brian Tyler. We'd also like to acknowledge the entire LEGO Games team, as well as the great folks at the LEGO Idea House for their support. For questions or comments, write us at bitsandbricks@lego.com. And as always, stay tuned for more episodes of Bits and Bricks.